Oi, oi, it's your boy, the Caro Hat of Slipping on the Mat, Jack Slack, and it's the Jack Slack DC Shit Commentary Hour Watchdog episode of the Jack Slack podcast. And we're talking about all the Daniel Cormier comments that will make you go, fuck's sake. But in addition to that, we'll be talking about UFC 268, and a little bit of Bellator. Please, Ireland. There will be another Conor McGregor, we promise. Actually, that was Bellator 270, so they've overtaken the UFC in numbers, if they haven't in quality. Let's get into these fights. We'll go UFC first, obviously, because that's the one that you're here for. That's the one that mattered. Kamaru Usman versus Colby Covington. We talked about this pre-fight. I put it in the Po Boys preview of the boycast, but yeah, very interesting. Colby Covington changed to a gym that I had not heard of before, another place down in Florida, but came in with an interesting strategy. Now, see, my huge focus in the first when talking about the first fight and then the rematch was that Kamaru Usman's southpaw stance and southpaw jab especially carried him into the fight, and Colby Covington's corner, the ATT corner, you know, the people who invented the calf kick, particularly as a counter to the jab, didn't tell him once to go for the calf kick. And you're like, well, that's the thing that would stop him from jabbing you from southpaw. And so I spent a long time going like, yes, he should have done that. And he came out for this fight and he looked like he wanted to do it, except Usman never went southpaw. So he was sort of left, you know, waiting for the kick, and then he'd switch to orthodox to try and calf kick Usman on the orthodox side, and Usman would just see that coming because he had to switch to orthodox first. And he didn't really have any other weapons out of orthodox. So he was a bit hampered in that regard. I mean that's what you're seeing generally in MMA at the moment. If you can fight competently off both sides, it opens up sort of rear leg calf kicking from both sides and allows you to hide it better, because the calf kick is everything now. But Covington had a real trouble in the early going, with sort of confidence and just, you know, the range of Usman's jab. He was establishing it so well from orthodox, hitting him with the odd good 1-2, but it was just like Covington couldn't get into exchanges, because where he'd done okay in the first fight was in longer exchanges, and if you can't get past that first barrier and start creating exchanges without being worried about getting hurt, you're really stuck. And it took him getting knocked down in this. Was that the second he got knocked down in? But he really like overreached for Usman a couple of times in that round and got knocked down off it or got hurt off it. And then from there, like the whole fight opened up for him. You know, it was a case of okay, well, I've had the worst of it. Now I'll just bite down on my gum shield and make stuff happen. And wouldn't you know it, like 3, 4, 5, he looked so much better than he had in 1 and 2, and Usman had a lot more trouble with him. I think this one has sort of torn people because Colby did better when he started lengthening out these. Well, when he started getting into range to comfortably exchange and create combinations, and he'd start sort of he'd get the momentum going his way with a couple of good punches, and then he'd dive on the hips, and people go, well, why are you trying to take him down? You should be pushing this advantage. But I think the takedown attempts were him trying to push his advantage. His advantage has always been the cardio and making people work, and not so much just like banging people out on the feet. So I thought, yeah, not going to lay into him too hard for that. There were some interesting moments, like DC, you know, terrible commentator, genuinely terrible, but doubly bad when he's paired up with Rogan, because everything he does seems to be like to impress Joe Rogan, and they do the sort of guys. Just guys watching MMA, you know, like, oh, screaming all the time. But DC will occasionally, like, he's a very smart guy, you know, he was a world champion, and he was pretty good in even the parts of MMA that he didn't have any reason to be good at. But he'll give you like a genuine technical assessment or tactical assessment. So, like in this first round, I think it was, Colby ducked in on a shot and got rolled all the way over the top, and Usman maintained his 100% takedown defense or whatever it is. And to stop everyone in the audience from just going, yeah, well, crap attempt, Colby, he said, no, Colby got to his hips there. Usman had to do an overwrap, which is, you know, you've missed your chance to underhook or push them off with your hands, so you wrap over their chest and then roll through. So he said Colby actually got in well on the shot there, and you saw Usman have to defend it another way. And he'll tell you that, and then just at the end he'll say, like, Kamaru Usman remained true to himself or something like that. You're just going, what the fuck is this self-help bollocks? And why are you just saying it? And then there was a bit where Colby got shucked his way behind Usman. I think it might have been a little duck under like Ricardo Ramos during an exchange, but he got behind Usman with a body lock and he did a little trip and put Usman down on his hands and knees. And for about a minute, DC was just going on about how that should be scored as a takedown. And actually, that's his takedown defense percentage gone down. And, just him and Rogan going, well, who am I to say that? And you're like, well, I get that you're a really like world-class wrestler, or you were, but this is just how we do the stats in MMA. Like, you can't retroactively go back and change it all. Also, different sport. Like, in wrestling, everyone tries to... Well, if you ever watched any Greco-Roman, it's fucking awful, because if they hit any work on the mat, the guy just goes belly down with his hands and legs as wide as possible, trying not to get turned over. How well will that work in MMA? They're not the same sport. Takedowns in MMA are takedowns with control. Really, this whole event just hammered home to me that I need to start doing an alternate commentary. Gonna work it out at some point. It's gonna be tricky because... Obviously, it's in the middle of the night UK time, but I'd quite like to do that before I have a screaming kid in the background the entire way through. So that is a slacky promise. I will at some point have this streaming thing going for the boys. It might not be on the regular, but I will offer you an alternative to just terrible commentary. And then the fact that they stopped, like, there's a fight going on and they're busy snarkily talking about how that DC was accused of bias in commentating, like, for about a solid minute. In the fight, it was just awful. Anyway, back to Covington versus Usman. Actually, because this was Trevor Whitman FC, I thought it was very interesting that they've got some similar stylistic tendencies in their striking. Usman, Gaethje, and Namajunas, but Usman is sort of like the middle in between Gaethje and Namajunas in one regard. Namajunas is a lot happier to give ground. So if you watch her, especially in round 1 and round 2, when she's full of pep, she'll give ground every time the opponent comes back at her and just let them fall short. Gaethje doesn't tend to do that. Gaethje tends to duck down into the opponent, which tends to open up the uppercut a lot of the time. As you saw Michael Chandler trying to take his head off with it. And Usman is nicely in the center, like he was dropping away a lot, which is why Colby was having so much trouble landing low kicks, when he was showing... I mean, it helped that he was going orthodox first and very obviously telegraphing it because he doesn't have any other techniques from orthodox. But then when he was hanging around more, trying to use his head movement and stay in the pocket, or was just staying in range and using his head movement because he didn't want to move back, he ended up in line for the uppercut a lot more, and you saw Colby throwing it a lot, even if he wasn't hitting it a lot. But I had heaps of fun watching this fight. I thought it was... I thought Usman looked better than the first time, and I thought Colby looked better than the first time. And I think it's certainly... Because, Colby in the meantime has only fought a washed Tyron Woodley, so it's sort of been like, is this deserved? Should this be happening? And I think, yeah, cool. It was great. I think it's very hard now because that was a close fight. It was a close decision. They've had 2 close fights, but one of them was a stoppage, so you don't get to count that as a close fight. But Colby has the same situation as Zhang Weili now, which is where you might have done enough that on a different scorecard you won it, but you don't get another go at it because you're now down 2-0 basically. But it was nice watching them, do their little sort of stand almost lips to lips, and what was he said? Something like nothing but respect, get your money, dog, or whatever it was at the end. But it's just Colby in a nutshell. He's found his thing, his grift, and then as soon as it's not time to grift, he's a cool guy. And I'm sure there'll be commentators being like, oh, liberal cuck Jack Slack thinks Colby's grifting because he's right wing. And you're like, no, before that, his thing was like tweeting out movie spoilers. I think he just found things that were going to annoy people. I don't personally care what his alignments are. He has always wanted to be annoying and in people's faces. And it's worked fantastically for him. And literally the day after, he's like, oh, Kamaru Usman is a filthy cheat and I deserved to win and I want the rematch. And you're like, we just watched you. Be cool. So, yeah. If they did the rematch, fine. But I think he should probably do something else first. However, there's not an awful lot going on in that division. You've got Chimaev and Leon Edwards, basically. If Edwards loses to Masvidal, you've basically only got Chimaev. That'll take a few months to push through. And Colby is clearly very, very good. So if he just hangs around, he'll get another crack at it. I feel like he's more than proved that he's tough enough to be in there with Usman and to make Usman work and to bring Usman to like the absolute peak of his ability, having to snatch for everything. And it is a case where I don't necessarily know the tactical adjustments that he'll need to make to beat Kamaru Usman, because the ones that I said in the previous podcast, he came out and they didn't even matter because Usman didn't even do the strategy from the first fight. So it didn't even go southpaw for any length of time. But I feel like he is within grasping distance. It's a case where doing the right things on the night will win him the belt from Usman. Whereas everyone else Usman's fought has just looked like they don't have anything for him. But in addition to heaping praise on Colby, I also want to heap praise on Kamaru Usman. For the first 2 rounds there, it looked like he just upped it a whole nother level, and Colby wasn't going to get into it. And when you're the top dog and you're pound for pound whatever, and you face almost no adversity for months at a time or multiple fights at a time, it's got to be jarring when someone comes back and gets in your face and hits you well, or almost takes you down and all that stuff, and gets you off your game and says to you, like, you aren't quite what you thought you were. To be able to bounce back into that almost immediately is also an impressive feat. The fallout from that fight was that 2 professional hangers-on, Dylan Dennis and Ali Abdelaziz, got into a fight backstage. I was like, how are you going to throw hands when you're holding onto coattails so hard? And Dylan Dennis got ejected. Who the fuck was Dylan Dennis there for? There wasn't an SBGI guy fighting. That dude's whole gig is like just getting dunked on, calling out people, and then never actually fighting. But anyway, what else was good on this card? I watched it in a jumbled order because I stayed up until I think it was Vera Edgar, and then I just was like, this is too much, and went to bed, and then I got up and I watched Usman Covington, and then I watched Rose Namajunas versus Weili Zhang after that. So hang on, let's do Zhang versus Namajunas. I want to shock you, lads. Despite Rose Namajunas being like my favourite women's fighter of all time, I gave this 1-2-3 Zhang, and then 4-5 Namajunas. But the first round I could see going either way. The absurd one was the guy who gave Rose Namajunas 4 rounds to 1. You're going, which of 2 and 3 did you score for her when she was like not landing and getting outlanded and getting taken down and getting hit while on the bottom while not really doing anything? But this was, I thought, such a good showing tactically from Zhang Weili. She went to hang out with Eric Albarracin and Henry Cejudo. Now, obviously, they also coach Paulo Costa, who comes in with almost no strategy for any fight he's in. But Henry Cejudo, really interesting character, because he basically, he had some decent counterpunching from quite early on. He then adopted like the karate-esque stance. But basically, with good counterpunches and low kicks, he managed to like adapt his game plan for multiple different opponents and do different things. And, obviously apply his world-class wrestling within that. But it was a couple of very simple weapons, and he was able to realize that through footwork and placement in the cage, and choosing when to open up the distance between him and his opponent and choosing when to close it down, he could use those 2 things in ways that like other people can't use 100 different techniques. 2 weapons in multiple contexts, basically. So, if you watch him against Dominic Cruz, where he just comes out and he's like, yeah, I'm going to low kick him. And he does it in the most perfect way for Dominic Cruz. Just keeps faking him back towards the fence. Every time he steps in, Dominic Cruz takes a full step back into the opposite stance. So he steps with the intention of kicking the other leg. Then he gets into the fence. He knows that Dominic Cruz is going to circle one way or the other, targets the trailing leg as he circles. Just one technique, the low kick, which even his mechanics are probably not like the best ever, but he has a good low kick, so he set himself up to do it in a few different ways that are going to be perfect for that opponent. And that's what you saw here with Zhang Weili, because I've said before, like, I was not super impressed with Zhang Weili before the Jessica Andrade fight. She had, was it 3 fights in the UFC? She triangled some lass or finished one lass, but she'd had a close decision with Tisha Torres where she looked mediocre, And then she had a close decision with Danielle. Well, she managed to make Danielle Taylor look competitive, despite like a foot reach advantage. And she just had like this inside low kick and a side kick, and that was about it. And she's got a big right hand when you stand close enough. She's big and strong, but she was getting into these like close kickboxing matches against people who her power and athleticism said she shouldn't get into close kickboxing matches with these people. And then she blew out Jessica Andrade because Andrade came to her and made her fight. And it was a case of like, oh wait, she's actually really powerful if you just walk onto her. And then she fought Joanna Jędrzejczyk and basically, just exchanged with her and beat her on power in the exchanges, but close decision. So it was basically two good fights, and everyone was like, Namajunas will never beat this lass when they made that matchup because of two good fights, and that's how the fight game works. People are they go on whatever they've seen most recently. There were people who were convinced like she was a massive knockout artist when really she'd finished a load of actual bums in China. If you look at the records of her opponents, they are atrocious. And then had a load of close fights in the UFC and one stoppage and then a good fight with Joanna Jędrzejczyk. But people just couldn't imagine her losing or not winning by knockout. But it was like the two things, the good right hand and the inside low kick and then the side kick after it. And this one, she came out completely different stuff. Lovely right low kick, using it in all the right times and places, setting it up well. Like, so from the get-go, because Rose Namajunas will bounce her lead leg in and then bounce back to sort of a squarer stance, putting her lead foot in and out, doing the hokey cokey and shaking it all about. She'd pump in with a fake or a jab or whatever, and then step through and low kick after it. So she made distance, knowing that Namajunas was going to go back. She waited for Namajunas to come in, slipped inside of the jab or outside of the cross, and threw the counter right low kick and slammed it into her leg while it was placed down there in front of her, unable to check. And she mainly went between those two applications of it, but it was just a really simple mechanical technique, or really simple mechanically technique, applied with good context. Being able to read the opponent, being able to make the opportunities for it in other occasions. And then timing that beautiful duck in on the body lock, got her dead to rights with it, because you saw her, the moment she was under Rose's arms, she locked her hands behind her back, pulled the small of her back in, and you're like, well, not going to really recover from that. Step round, took her down. Rose is really good off her back, as much as that matters in modern MMA, but she went to butterfly sweep her, and I really liked what Zhang did on that, because when you see guys start elevating with a butterfly sweep, there's a few different ways to butterfly sweep people, but like the really effective one for most people is to lift with one leg and then the other leg is pressing off the ground. So you're almost going up on your side and you're getting up on the bottom leg. You're lifting your own arse off the floor. And so that was what was happening. Rose was lifting with one leg. The other leg was on the floor trying to lift her hips. And Zhang was being elevated up in the air by her inseam. And the way you deal with that, if you got the underhook, as Zhang did, is you either try and kick your top leg off the hook and just pass to side control or drop down into half guard or whatever, or you try and use you drive off the ground with your free leg and your hands, and you turn your hips so that you bring their hook, which is lifting you up, across their body, and you sort of smash down so that your hips are on the outside of their knee and thigh. And if you'll know what I mean if you remember Damian Maia's passing or BJ Penn's passing, where the guy would they'd put themselves on the butterfly hooks and the guy would start lifting them, and then they just turn their hips and end up in that smashing position with the opponent's legs crossed over with their knee on top of it. But instead of that, Zhang hopped back into her and put herself in half guard on the leg that was elevating her, which I don't think I've ever seen anyone do. It was very, very cool. But totally on brand with Eric Albarracin and his team. You got good wrestlers like Henry Cejudo. You probably want the half guard. More than you want to be elevated, at least. Didn't do that much damage from top because she kept standing, and then she'd throw punches down on the body, which we're a big fan of on this show, or big fans of. Straight punching down on the body is money. Because how often do you get to hit the solar plexus with the guarantee that they're not going to move back? So, think of Yan versus Aldo, or Masvidal versus Diaz, GSP versus Penn. Just punch down on the solar plexus, and she was trying to do that, but Rose was doing a really good job of getting her hips up keeping her legs on Zhang and then up kicking at her. Interesting night for up kicks between her and Chito Vera. But the second round was more of the same. Lovely counter low kicking. Well, I mean, it wasn't more of the same. It was Zhang working more effectively. Lovely low kicking. Good left hooks, I thought, because again, I've said like Zhang, big right hand, big left low kick, and in this fight she's landing big right low kicks and big left hands, which a complete turnaround. And I was like, damn, this is a new woman. There was a moment where because Rose was still doing the movement stuff in this round, and she goes to do in point fighting you used to call it a switch 45, which is where you step out. So you're orthodox, you sidestep out to your left, and then you come back in towards them with your right foot forward. So you've sidestepped off and changed stances basically by leaving the right foot behind. And she did it. And the moment she did the switch, Zhang just went no and picked up her leg and took her down. Because we always say this, but like the moment the opponent changes stances is the moment where they're most vulnerable for whatever they would be vulnerable to in the stance that they're switching into. So my favorite example is always Danny Jacobs versus Gennady Golovkin. Been giving him fits from both stances, and Golovkin's just waiting for him to change to southpaw. And the moment that he starts, he just throws this right hand like a foot behind where Jacobs starts and catches him with a straight right hand down the pipe. Because a right hand lead against an orthodox fighter, going to hit their shoulder probably, bit of a waste of time. But because he was switching into southpaw, it was the perfect punch once it got there and once he'd switched stances. But picking up a takedown is the same effect. You're changing your stance. You're going to have to change which leg you're pulling back when you attempt to sprawl or take your leg away from them. And so she just picked it up, took it down. It was dead easy. Round 3, I think it was lovely low kick into left hook from Zhang. It's all blurring together now, but Rose came down off the bouncy stance, and she does sort of fight in two modes, which is something we talk about a lot, but she fights in that bouncing in and out stance, or bouncing in and out mode, where she's standing very far away from the opponent, and she bounces her left foot in, like advances her left hip, very side on, and then she bounces it back into sort of a square stance. She'll do a little bounce round to the side, so she's squared up and off to her right a little bit, and then she bounces in again, bladed. And she uses that to set up those like long leaping left hooks and jabs and things. But then she has another mode where she's standing very heavy on the front foot and she stands a lot closer to the opponent. And that meant she was eating the low kicks on her leg, but her leg was planted. She wasn't as vulnerable. Typically, the ones that really hurt you when you're getting low kicked are the ones where you're just coming off the lead leg or you're just going on to the lead leg, where the weight is not firmly planted through the leg, so you can get jarred at the knee. Kicking someone in the thigh when their leg is planted will still chew up the thigh. It's just that it won't jar the joint itself, which is when you see like one low kick really fuck someone up, that tends to be it. Where you see like an accumulation of low kicks, that's basically on the muscle and the nerve. At least with low kicks on the thigh, which is what we're talking about here, classical low kicks, as opposed to neo-low kicks, which are calf kicks, or kicking below the knee generally. But by standing heavier on her lead foot, Rose squares up more. She likes to throw the left hook off that stance. She likes to lead with the right hand and throw a long left jab. She was lighting Jędrzejczyk up with that in the second fight. It's a Kovalev favourite. If you watch Sergey Kovalev, he knocked a ton of guys down with jabs. And in boxing, they're like, you can't knock people down with jabs. You're watching him load himself up with the half-assed right straight first, like squaring his hips all the way up and then throwing this long-ass, what Bas Rutten would call a left straight, Archie Moore called it a left cross. But, it's not a jab. It's a jab, but it's not. It's a full-body fuck-em-up movement. And that was really like the later rounds of the second Jędrzejczyk fight. Rose had to fight less mobile, especially because Jędrzejczyk was landing lots of low kicks and things, and she got in the face of Namajunas and fought in the pocket in exchanges and stuff, and that was when she was moving her head more, a little bit more like Gaethje and Usman than in the early going. And in the fifth round, she scored a takedown and got top position. Wasn't really able to do much with it, but it was a very fine line there anyway, because Zhang, while she was really impressive with her grappling, like trying to take the back and stuff, with her takedowns early on and stuff, she wasn't, in her own right, she wasn't landing a lot of blows either. And this is the thing, we're supposed to be scoring damage first, we're supposed to be scoring effective offense, and having top control, yeah, I suppose it's more effective offense than having bottom control, but in the same, it's also sort of a stalemate. But this is the thing about Rose. I think you definitely have proof that, or reason to believe that there's strong support for the idea that she makes a devastating first impression on people, and then in her rematches, she's not nearly as far ahead of them. I think she really catches people by surprise when they first fight her. It's particularly the movement, the distance she can cover from that bouncing stance. I mean, she's good when she goes front foot heavy and does the like trading and combination punching, but she's not nearly as surprising because there isn't anyone in the division who does move and cover distance like her from that stance that she uses for the first 2 rounds. The thing is that she struggles to keep it up over the course of 5 rounds or longer fights, which her rematches tend to be. And low kicks really bother her too, you know. And to be fair, like the Andrade rematch wasn't 5 rounds, and Andrade isn't very technically adept as a striker, but she still managed to sort of grind her down just by knowing or like having that internal knowledge of the rhythms and the having seen it before, not just getting caught cold by this woman who you can't touch, but she's either miles away or hitting your face and then away again. So like I said, I gave Zhang 3 rounds and Rose 2. I thought they were all 10-9 margins. Honestly, you probably could have the first 10-10. I suppose that's the thing. If you willingly accept that it's like, yeah, you could score that either way, then you could definitely score it a 10-10. But, you know, not too upset about Namajunas winning because her good rounds were good, and that's the way that we have to judge fights. Just we have to score them. But I would say that I think Zhang Weili should continue working with Eric Albarracin and Henry Cejudo. I think she's a great fit for them. So impressed with that. Oh my God, by the way, did you see the graphics that they had for that superhero section? And then later in the night, it was revealed that they had some kind of Marvel sponsorship for the night or whatever it was. Go and see the internals or whatever it is. But someone pointed out that it looked like that 1990, I don't know, was it 4? Animated series. It was like a Canadian thing called Reboot. And it was like, if you remember like the Money for Nothing video, it was about that time where everyone's like, damn, 3D models, that's the future. But Reboot was, yeah, I mean, it was really impressive at the time, but now it looks bizarre. And that is how this looked. Just the faces they had on, I think it was Captain America Colby and like the Green Lantern, who isn't even Marvel, but, or is he? Shit, I can't remember. But yeah, they had Usman as that. It was really strange. Anyway, back to the fights, because they were good, and I feel like I'm doing well being positive today. Marlon Vera versus Frankie Edgar. Yeah. Sort of what you expected. We said, like, Marlon Vera does not typically stop a good takedown. And it is going to be hard getting pressure going against a guy who can just duck in and take you down. But did, like, first round he got taken down and did very little from the bottom, just tried to upkick and got hit a bit. Second round, more of the same, but more of sort of effective work from the bottom, trying to throw stuff up. And then he was able to get up and Edgar started tiring. And he was hitting with lovely front kicks to the body, nice punching combinations, flipped him off, which everyone was well mad about because it's Frankie Edgar. But Cheeto always comes across as an angry dingus. And in the third round, he landed some nice front kicks to the body, doing little hopping Groenhart knees is what I call them, because not because Myrtle Groenhart's ever knocked anyone out with one, but because he does them fucking constantly. It's where you fake the rear leg, you bring your rear leg up and then you jump with your lead leg. It's the same one Alex Pereira used to knock that lad out. It's the scissor flying knee, and Vera was landing some nice ones of those to the body along the fence. It was basically Vera versus the low level competition, but in the third round, Frankie Edgar became one of them. It was very impressive that Vera was able to tire him out and wilt him. And then he hit him with a front kick to the face, sent him down, got the knockout. Edgar was very angry about it, but he did go down like, controlled demolition, like Vitor, just straight on top of his stance and then fell on his face. The photo of it is absolutely amazing. It's one of those punch face photos. It's up there with, I think it was Samuel Peter getting punched by Vladimir Klitschko. But the fist takes up his whole face, and it's like his face is curving around the fist. It's amazing. But this one is just phenomenal. Frankie Edgar's mouth is like 2 feet wide, and his eyes are all stretched out. It's just incredible, like how it makes you realize how flappy your face is, and especially because this was Edgar at bantamweight. He was the sveltest I've ever seen him. He didn't look like the same person at all. But yeah, nice knockout by Vera. Really, just like Frankie Edgar's come down 2 weight classes and he's still the smaller man. It's insane. It's incredible what he's able to do at lightweight, and I think it should make people realize, this is him trying to recapture some magic by going down in weight. But what he was able to do in his prime, I think people should realize that, like, yes, you can. You don't need to be the absolute heaviest person in the class. You don't need to be killing yourself to do this. Frankie Edgar at lightweight was amazing. And he was very good at featherweight too, and that wasn't the biggest cut ever. But it was this one, and then the Kid Yamamoto versus Demetrius Johnson. They're just 2 fights where you go, wait, how big was that guy in the end? I don't even realize. I don't understand, because Kid Yamamoto spent his career at lightweight in Japan, knocking out like good fighters like Kaoluno, Genki Sudo. Hoyle Gracie's not a good fighter, but he knocked him out. But yeah, he won like lightweight tournaments in Japan because they didn't have a featherweight class, and the idea was always Kid Yamamoto would be a featherweight if they had the class. When he comes to the UFC, he ends up at flyweight fighting Demetrius Johnson, and Demetrius Johnson's bigger than him. Crazy. 155. Well, I think Japan was 160 pounds back in the day because that was the class that they had for Gomi and Pride. So I think K1 did that as well. 160 pounds to 125 pounds. Bonkers. Anyway, Shane Burgos versus Billy Quarantillo was a good, fun fight. I mean, this matched up with everything I said on the Boycast. I said Shane Burgos will have a great fight with anyone, and I think that's to his detriment. I likened him to Benson Henderson, who was the same. Benson Henderson became the lightweight champion of the world. He became the champion of the deepest division in the UFC. And then, with the exception of Nate Diaz, who absolutely mauled, but like a very old Josh Thompson, a very old and washed up Gilbert Melendez, who after that fight, every fight he had was a disaster. He's fighting these guys who are very much on the tail end of their career and getting split decisions against them in competitive fights. And you're going, but I know that Benson Henderson is an amazingly talented guy. He's just one of those fighters who can or does have a tear up with everyone, no matter how good or not good they are. And Burgos is the same. Like, he will have a tear up with Edson Barbosa and Josh Emmett, who are genuinely top tier guys, but they'll also have a tear up with Billy Quarantillo, who shouldn't be that level. And it was literally what we said about it in the pre-fight. I suppose if you're not a boy, sign up, go listen to the pre-fight. It makes me sound prescient, but it was a case of like Burgos will slip a punch and counter, but he'll then ignore 2 punches. It's just like he's got good head movement, except when he's not moving his head. It's a really weird thing to watch, but that was the case. Like Billy Quarantillo just pumped out jabs 4 or 5 at a time, and Burgos would slip one and then get hit by the other 4. It was just bizarre. And then Billy Quarantillo, when he could catch the collar tie and start hammering in uppercuts, like Poirier versus Duffy, it doesn't matter how nice your footwork is or your head movement. If I've got my hand on the scruff of your neck, I'm always going to hit you. But Burgos landed nice counters, did some decent wrestling, landed some good low kicks, landed some good front kicks to the body. And I said in the pre-fight, and I said during the fight, like, if I could have him throw that a dozen times around, that front kick to the body, I would. I love it. It was annoying guys like Emmett and Edson Barbosa. If it's good enough to annoy them, it's good enough that you should be doing it all the time. It's just another fight where I didn't see real improvement or changes in Emmett. I haven't seen Emmett in a while, actually. In Shane Burgos, it was it was more of the same, and the same has been getting him hurt by very good fighters. He's a guy with a lot of talent, and he's also fucking massive. He's got a back like a barn door, and the things that he does well, I like. But he does them in a way that gets him into firefights. Like, it wouldn't be like he's got his hands down when he's slipping punches. If he went to a cross guard, that would be he'd keep his head safer. Yeah, his body would be exposed, but it's exposed now with his hands down by his hips. Like, so just adopt a cross guard when you're doing your slipping. It'll give you more margin for error. Or just keep your hands up, do peekaboo. There's no point having your hands down by your waist when you're slipping punches and trying to move forward. And kick more, but it's irritating because watching Shane Burgos, you see him land his jab, you go, nice. You see him land those beautiful slips to body shots, you go, nice. and then you just watch him get dinged with wild overhands as he's standing there staring at them, and you're going, ooh, that shouldn't be happening. And I think that's the danger of enjoying a firefight too much as well. I'm sure we can all think of examples of guys who, well, I mean, like Michael Chandler in the not the co-main event, my main event, but Michael Chandler doing the like, come on, yeah, woo, hype up the crowd stuff. Like, if you're genuinely into that and you're not so elite that you're just smoking everyone, it's very easy to just get into wars for no reason and fight your own career away before it's necessarily time to, or before you should. Yeah, you might get some fight of the night bonuses, you might get some secret bonuses backstage, but if you're good enough that you could be winning these fights, and I believe that Shane Burgos is, why bother being like, yes, I'm going to have a firefight with this guy who probably shouldn't be getting into firefights with me. There are too many fighters who want to have like the sporting fun engagement when really they should be ruthlessly shutting their opponent out of the fight. But anyway, it was a good fight. It was fun. But yeah, it was discouraging if you were hoping that after the Emmett and Barboza fights, Burgos was going to make a significant change. I mean, changing weight classes would be the most significant thing. I imagine he could take a hell of a shot at lightweight. So Justin Gaethje versus Michael Chandler, the people's main event. This one absolutely lived up to it. I mean, I said before this fight, I hope I hope it's a banger, but part of me wants Michael Chandler to do the Bellator Michael Chandler, which was, so many people have seen all the highlights of him knocking people out, and they don't realize that, like, against Gaethje Yamauchi and Brent Primus and people like that, he'll try and knock him out in the first round, get a bit tired, and then take him down into closed guard and hump him along the fence. Watch the Gaethje Yamauchi. Actually, don't watch the Gaethje Yamauchi fight, but if you do watch the Gaethje Yamauchi fight, that's what that is. And I thought, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we got some of that here? But no, he came to bang. Gaethje came to bang. And bang, they did. Technical stuff. Well, we talked about Chandler's jab in the pre-fight, like how he just sort of lunges into it. Like every punch is a power punch, and his jab is like this big lunging movement. Doesn't combine well with his other punches. It's not really setting anything up. But Gaethje got like hit by a couple early and was like, ow, and then started to time him. He was timing the left hook really well a couple of times in this fight. We talked about how the check and left hook could be a real big deal, as Michael Chandler famously got knocked out in his last fight by the best left hook probably ever in MMA. Really lovely stuff. But it was very interesting because they're both ducking down and getting in close to each other and coming up swinging left hooks and right overhands. And then they're both trying to exploit that with uppercuts. For Chandler, it is because, the way that Gaethje moves his head like into the center of the opponent's chest as they step in, which sets him up to like come up with the huge left hook or throw the big overhand swing. But it also just sort of like stumps their offense. The problem is that the one thing you are massively in danger from when you put your head like in the center of the opponent's chest, well, in addition to like snap downs, but if you're just engaged, you're a very strong wrestler anyway, is the guy coming up the center with the uppercut. If he can get you to duck into it, that is. If you can preempt your move to the middle of his chest. If you're like doing that, if you're leaning into the center of someone's chest, you have to be able to move your head side to side as you do it to take it off the central line and diminish the threat of the uppercut. But, Gaethje likes to sort of crowd in on guys as they step in on him and then try and clip them on the way out. Meanwhile, for Chandler, it was because he'd like jab in and duck down and then try and swing, or sort of squat down in his stance and try and swing the overhand across the top. So if you watch the knockdown uppercut from, was it the second round? When Gaethje almost killed him, it was because Chandler threw the jab, Gaethje threw the uppercut, like moved his head offline and threw the uppercut inside of the jab, which is a cool technique. It can be done. It worked there because the guy was squatting down onto the uppercut. His jab was like a throwaway. But it can also work as a counter to the jab. It's something we talk about from time to time. The Corbett uppercut, because Jim Corbett was apparently amazing at this. He made Bob Fitzsimmons bite his tongue in half doing it. But you won't see that often. Like, you'll see it occasionally. I see a lot of clips of it from like ACA, from Russian organizations. And I realized that one of the guys I saw do it was Khamzat. So now I'm a Khamzat fan. But think of how like a cross counter is an overhand across the top of the jab. So you slip to the inside of the opponent's jab towards their chest, and you throw the right hand across the top as the jab goes over your shoulder. Now, if you do the same thing, but instead of the overhand across the top, you come inside with the right uppercut, that's the Corbett uppercut. It's a real tricky punch. This wasn't quite that, but it was similar. The low kick for Gaethje was landing constantly. You could see Chandler sort of, at moments his foot would go to sleep a little bit, but not enough that Gaethje was able to pounce on him. He changed stances a couple of times, but he's not nearly the same fighter from Southpaw. Southpaw for him really is like he throws the overhand, steps in, and then he lands a left hand from Southpaw. He doesn't really fight out of the Southpaw stance a lot. It's more of a shift he does. I think the third round, when Gaethje had really sort of taken the lead and Chandler was just sort of hyping up the crowd and calling him on and stuff. On the one hand, I was super impressed by Chandler's durability in this fight. But I was worried that judges would be swayed by that bullshit, because sometimes they are. Like, if you're like, come on, yeah, the judges are like, yes, he's getting hit a lot, but look how game he is. He must be, why would someone taunt if they're not winning? But, I thought they both took their lumps in this fight. There were moments where basically Gaethje was, for the first round, he looked like old Gaethje. The way he was just like ducking in, swinging wild right hands, and then throwing himself out of position, taking big breaths. I was like, uh-oh, we're back to pre-Poirier Gaethje here. But he became more controlled through the fight. But I thought Chandler hit him with a lot of good punches, and then there was a photo of them in the hospital together, and Chandler's face is fucked, while Gaethje looks like he's just had someone gi rub his face, maybe. Like, there's not a lot of damage on him. Visible damage, at least. But, you will... I'm constantly saying, like, look at his face, because it's a famous Lennox Lewis quote. But it is a bullshit way to pretend to judge fights, because some guys just have, like, unbreakable skin. Muhammad Ali basically never cut. Dan Henderson was said to have, like, alligator skin. Whereas other guys bruise like peaches. Fedor Emelianenko. Like, if you looked at him ensconced, he'd start bleeding. And it isn't really a measure of, like, how... People treat it as a measure of, like, how many punches have landed, but it's not a very good measure of, like, how badly hurt you were. It really is only skin deep. But, for a pasty-skinned ginger dude, Justin Gaethje's face doesn't cut very easily. I was quite surprised. So really, like, my favourite thing about that fight... Well, firstly, banger. Easy candidate for fight of the year. Every exchange... Because I was like, Gaethje's pulling ahead, but I was also like... Oh, I wish he'd stop ducking in like that. He's going to get himself knocked out. And I think really it was a great account for himself by Michael Chandler. There's a reason that people are still like, well, he's lost both his, 2 of his 3 UFC fights, but he's still top 5, even though he got beat up here. His chin looked phenomenal in this fight. And his recovery, like Gaethje, when he hits dudes with uppercuts, they die, typically. Like this, was it Luis Palomino where he ducks in to fake the takedown attempt, comes up with the uppercut and just leaves him staring at the ring lights? But this is a weird one. It's like, because Chandler has always been known for a little bit of a shaky chin and durability issues or coming back from being hurt issues. And there are fights like this where guys just suddenly won't be chinny at all. It's Bigfoot versus Mark Hunt. Is a great example. I mean, obviously, Bigfoot tested positive for some kind of drug after that, but there aren't many drugs that, well, as far as I know, make your chin better. To be able to just go 5 rounds hell for leather with Mark Hunt, and then they had a rematch, and Mark Hunt easily starched him. But just for one night, he just could take every punch that Mark Hunt threw. And another one is like career long. Andrei Arlovski, famous for being not able to take the power of big heavyweights. Suddenly, he's not got that problem. He's 45 years old or whatever, and it's not been a problem for him a little while. But Chandler's chin looked really quite rock solid in this fight, and his ability to recover and keep fighting. So really, the person it benefits the most this fight, probably, Charles Oliveira, who himself had a reputation as a glass cannon, but came back from almost being smashed to knock out Michael Chandler in one perfect punch, basically. It's weird because with Gaethje and Poirier, I mean, I think a lot of people think of Gaethje and Poirier as the top 2 guys at lightweight. I think MMA Fighting has Poirier ranked as their number 1 lightweight in the world, which I'm fine with because he's done so much, and because of the way that the title picture shaped out after Khabib leaving, we don't really, it hasn't really been properly sorted out. But equally, I think there's a lot of people looking at that like Charles Oliveira is just going to be a stepping stone for them, and I think if this fight tells you anything, it's that, like, no, Charles Oliveira, a very dangerous man, and nobody's stepping stone, probably. Actually, on the subject of Oliveira's win and why Chandler's chin held up so well, a lot of it can be rhythm. If you get into these like prolonged slobber knocker fights where guys are just going 1, 2, 3 break, 1, 2, 3 break, or 1, 2 break, it becomes very because it's your brain. Your brain shuts off when it doesn't expect trauma. You know, it's the punch you don't see that hurts you. Oliveira caught Chandler with a beautiful counterpunch when he wasn't really expecting much back, and this fight was just the two of them slugging it out. So it really is I mean, I don't want to say like mind over matter, but like what you're expecting is a lot to do with what you can take. There are great fighters who could be like knockout gamed on the street, because if you're not expecting to be punched in the head, you know, your brain will take over for you. And it is the thinking is that it's some kind of really stupid way of the brain trying to protect itself, shutting down temporarily when you experience unexpected brain trauma. But anyway, let's move on. Now, we're almost at an hour, or at least I've been recording for almost an hour, and I think we've done 4 fights. What else was good? Alex Pereira. Okay, this was a fun one because I had one of those moments where a tweet goes big because I predicted quotes. It's like when Volkov was fighting Walt Harris, and I said he should focus on the right front kick to the body. Then he knocked him out with it. Sometimes I have those, but this one, I said basically the end of the first round after Alex Pereira couldn't get off the fence. I said, so he's going to be the throw a flying knee at the start of the next round kind of MMA striker. And then he did and knocked him out, and everyone was like, what? No way. But I was literally just making a joke about how, you know, what desperate strikers do when they're losing wrestling exchanges. And obviously, Pereira is also known for the switch flying knee, or the Groenhart knee, as I sometimes call it. Yeah, this was not super encouraging. This is another example of like, if you finish strong, people won't remember the rest. But if you remember the rest, he looked bad. This guy who really doesn't have any big accolades, just holding him to the fence. No, I mean, the problem is like he got taken down. He did get up, but we've talked about this before. Like, if you are sat against the fence, you will get up at some point. If you are like, you and someone much better than you, they could take you down, put you on the fence. If you had infinite time and they didn't beat you to death with punches, you would eventually be able to get back to your feet. It's such a powerful, well, not technique, but series of techniques, the wall walk. But the problem is, and what people found with Khabib and Usman and Islam Makhachev and anyone else who's having effective work along the fence, is that if you can't disengage once you're up, you're just going to get taken down again. Or held there. And in this case, he was held there. But in cases of better wrestlers, he will be taken down again. This is something you can watch with Izzy. He's very good at getting up. He's very good at not being taken down. But the most important thing is that he's very good at breaking away. People don't chew up huge portions of the round holding Izzy along the fence. It doesn't happen much. There was a bit with Marvin Vettori in the last one against him. But for the most part, Izzy's been able to break hands and get away. And that's what Pereira was not able to do through that first round. He came out, he threw a flying knee, knocked him out in the second round. Everyone's now like, oh yeah, this is great. Get him in against Izzy. And to be honest, yeah, do get him in against Izzy as soon as possible. Because if Izzy beats Rob, there's not really anything else going on in that division. So someone laid out the perfect path for Pereira where, quote, he wouldn't even have to get good at MMA. I can't remember who it was. It was like Kevin Holland, maybe Till, and then Izzy. You know, it's amazing that in that division there's quite a few guys who just don't really wrestle at all. But I suppose that's the appeal. Like, when do you see Izzy taking people down? I assume that Izzy is a much better wrestler than Pereira, but when do you see him taking people down? So maybe if they put that fight together, it would be compelling. But it's the case that, like, you're not going to get a crack at number 1 in the world if you can't beat, like, number 15 in the world. Or at least a couple of people, like, around that level. So, yeah, love Alex Pereira. Love him in kickboxing. Would love him to be good at MMA, but so far he ain't. I mean, what are you going to do? Get Enrique da Silva back, that absolute schlub who lost to Gokhan Sasaki? Find the only person in the division who's bad enough at wrestling to want to stand with them? Anyway, what else? Oh, Bobby Green! Bobby Green, finally gets a signature win because Bobby Green's been around forever. He's been working so hard through 2020 and 2021. Just can't get the big results. Even had great fight with Rafael Fiziev. Did very well, but lost the decision ultimately. People are only ever going to look at that on the record now, and nobody will remember that he probably could have won that one. Thiago Moises beat him in a sketchy decision. And then his wins aren't finishes, typically. When was the last time he finished someone? James Krause in 2013. Fucking hell, that's a long... I mean, that tells you everything you need to know about Bobby Green. He's not good at forcing hurt on people. He's good at poking at people, outpointing them, taunting them, but ultimately not good at stopping people. But Al Iaquinta, literally, every time Al Iaquinta fights, I make that joke, I can't believe X, his opponent, has developed the best jab in MMA, because it was Habib, it was Dan Hooker, it was Donald Cerrone of all people. People are like, oh my God, their jab just got really good overnight, and then none of those fighters really jabbed anyone up ever again. It's just because Al Iaquinta can't move his fucking head. And literally, Bobby Green comes out, southpaw, hits him with a left straight off the bat, and I tweeted, Al's head movement on point already. Literally, Al just comes in, head straight up in the air, and got hit with a nice 1-2 and knocked out. Just incredible. Bobby Green never knocks anyone out. Got a knockout here. Good for him. I'm just glad that because Al Iaquinta had a weird thing. He was just a bad matchup for Kevin Lee. And when Kevin Lee was on a bit of a tear, Al Iaquinta came back after 2 years off and was like, yeah, I'll fight him. And got back into the top 5 or 10 or whatever it was. The guy was overranked for a very long time based on what he actually did. But then if someone's beating good people and you're beating them, it's hard with the ranking system to justify anything, really. But not a lot to say about this one. It was just very funny. I'm just glad for Bobby Green because he's been working his arse off. Hang on, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is his 6th fight since the pandemic, and he had a 7th one against Jim Miller that was cancelled. Oh, in fairness, it was cancelled after he collapsed after the weigh-ins. Fucking hell. But yeah, the man has been... I mean... Bobby Green, why do you fight like you're running out of time? Every day and night like you're running out of time. And then he gave the corny pep talk afterwards, had New York on its feet and stuff. And I was just imagining Michael Chandler backstage warming up but watching the TV and being like, fuck's sake, he stole my shtick. The sad part about Michael Chandler losing is that he clearly had something written ready for afterwards. Some kind of weird pep talk to deliver. The man just talks in 80s pep talks. Just a mashup. It's not how hard you get hit, it's how hard, if it bleeds, you can kill it. Hasta la vista, get to the chopper. Oh, Chris Curtis versus Phil Hawes. This was super, because on the pre-show, I would say, Phil Hawes is probably going to win this and end up fighting, someone of even less regard, because he beat... did I say Chris Hawes? I meant Phil Hawes. But he very hotly anticipated prospect, very strong wrestler, and on a 7-fight win streak. He beat Imavov, who had a great fight on this card, and he beat Dorcas. And they booked him against Darren Wynn, who he's basically DC's John Vellante. He's not winning, but he's here anyway. And then that fight was cancelled, and he gets this one. Chris Curtis knocked a dude out with was it a wheel kick or a hook kick or something? An amazing kick on the Contender Series back in 2018. They didn't hire him, and I still can't work out why. So he did he bounced around the place. He's been on the regional scene forever. And it's very weird because after this fight, they were it took him 10 years to get here. What a feel-good story. And you're just sort of well, you should have fucking hired him when he wheel-kicked a dude on the Contender Series. But he's been to PFL. He lost 3 in a row there, I think it was. But he's a wily old vet. And I thought it'd be an amazing feel-good story if he won. For me, that is, not feel-good in terms of I still think it's bollocks that he didn't get the shot in the UFC in the first place. But Phil Hawes is an enormously talented young fighter. And for the early going, Phil Hawes was beating the shit out of him, and Chris Curtis was sort of shoulder rolling and doing the old school. Well, any fighter I love, he just shoulder rolling, cross guarding, taking punches and stuff, but he was getting beaten up and wasn't really throwing counters back. And I was going, oh, this is bad. And then about 2 minutes in, can't remember when it happened specifically, but he's a southpaw, Phil Hawes is orthodox. Phil Hawes steps in to punch. Curtis throws a right hand, so lead uppercut, straight up the middle, and just dings him. And it's a very interesting punch, the counter lead hand uppercut, because it's, you can land a good lead hand uppercut when you're squared up and the opponent's bent forward, but to do it when they're stepping in and you're upright, it's sort of a trick punch. Alexis Arguello used to be very, very good at it. He was orthodox, but you can do it southpaw or orthodox. But it's a bit of a trick punch because you have to know exactly where their chin's going to be moving on to, and you're coming up the front of their face basically. And he caught it, and I was like, oh, is he getting his timing here? And then the fight went on, and he's still getting like massively outlanded, but he's getting closer and closer on these counters. And I'm opening up the old Paddy Power, trying to bet the in-play. I'm going, hang on a minute. And then while I'm trying to find it, Curtis lands a left hand as Hawes is stepping in and knocks him down and out. It was incredible. I had this, I was watching going, hang on. Just awesome to watch, because like the guy didn't have the technical advantage. Well, technical advantage is relative, but he didn't have the athleticism advantage. He didn't have the power advantage. He did, like, Phil Hawes ducked in on a few takedown attempts, and I wasn't clear if he was just sort of like throwing them in to mix up the striking, or if Curtis beat him to the hips and he was like, it's not worth the effort. But Curtis looked all right trying to shake off the takedown attempts. They just didn't seem very committed, is what I'm saying. But yeah, this was looked like it was going to be a Phil Hawes clinic, and Curtis used his toughness and his experience and just all that time spent sparring and fighting on the regionals. And, if you have 30 fights to your name, that is different to having like 10 fights to your name. Yeah, obviously, losing half your fights is not great, but experience is what matters a lot of the time. Or certainly if you choose to fight like this, experience matters. If you don't see a lot of like great shoulder rollers and counter punches, guys who counter punch from perfect range off the opponent's punches, who have like a couple of fights or a couple of years of experience or whatever. It takes rounds and rounds and rounds. And that's what Curtis showed in this fight. Like, he was fine standing there going, yeah, I'm getting beaten up, but I'm not dead. I'm not knocked out. I'll just keep looking for those opportunities, those openings. And he found it, and he knocked him out when he did. It was awesome. And to be honest, like, you could see Hawes slowing down from just putting it on Curtis. There's something to be said for, if you're not getting hurt too badly and the other guy is going out like he's going to try and kill you, if you can hang around a bit longer, you can break his will a little bit just by having the Homer Simpson head. But yeah, this was awesome. I felt so good for Chris Curtis. I don't think he's ever going to be like a world beater. I mean, it'd be amazing if he did like a Charles Oliveira turnaround, but how old is he? He's 32. Yeah, I mean, it's not impossible. Charles Oliveira was like 30 before he started getting really, really good again. But yeah, I was just really happy. Oh, and Tapology's bumped him up to number 23 in the world. Fucking hell. Good on him. Imavov versus Shabazian. I actually can't remember this one that well, but I do remember Imavov smashing him up. The TKO from the crucifix was brutal. You got to see a bit of wrestling from Imavov, who I mainly know as an awesome left hand. And for some reason, probably his name, I thought Imavov was like Russian, but he's out of Is it Fight Factory Paris with Lopez, the guy who trained Cyril Gane and Francis Ngannou. I mean, that guy is having such a great moment. It's interesting because, like, with the Bellator fights this weekend, where there was a lot of focus on SBGI, a lot of people were like, because both their main event and co-main event fighters lost, and everyone was like, "Is SBGI a shit gym? Is John Kavanagh a fraud or whatever?" And I'm like, "No, that's silly." But yeah, you can find an amazing talent, and just they'll burst through for you. And Conor McGregor was a lot better than anyone who's come out of SBGI before or since. But it's always amazing when a coach can do that a couple of times in quick succession, because, like, clearly he's been there for a while training people and working with fighters, but it's just all come along at once for him. He's just had this breakthrough with like 2 or 3 fighters. I mean, he trained the 2 top heavyweights in the world right now. Ian Gary versus Jordan Williams. Couple of things to note on this one. One, the fucking massive patch of herpes on Ian Gary's face. I mean, it's cold sore. Yeah, I know. It's kind of childish to be like, oh, herpes. But it is a contagious thing, and this is a fist fight where you're going to be coming into clinches. It's like when Kevin Lee's turning up with massive patches of staff, and you're going, come on. I mean, I want him to be able to fight and earn his paycheck, but I also want his opponent to not get that, and I want the commission to actually do its job. Yeah, a bit gross. And then he stood next to Rogan, like with his lips on his face, just shouting at him. Nasty. But Jordan Williams gave a good account of himself in the early going, put it on him. Was really doing a very good job of like pushing through. So like when we talk about like the double jab or picking up the lead leg to glide in, well, you're making more distance than you would because you're expecting the guy to float back. And that's what Ian Gary's been doing his whole Cage Warriors career, floating back, coming back with counters and so on. But his head's up in the air when he does it, so Jordan Williams was able to get him going back and then crack him a couple of times, which was nice. Wasn't looking good for Gary, and then he just landed a beautiful open side counter, the Conor McGregor counter. Glide back and off to the side and throw the rear hand over the top of the opponents. And it worked because he was the orthodox fighter and Williams was the southpaw in this one. It was a really nice counter. It was a really nice finish. Didn't look great in the early going, but pulled it off and then did his charismatic thing on the microphone and got everyone interested. So good for him. It's like Paddy Pimblett. I got friends asking me like, is this Paddy Pimblett guy as good as he seems? And I'm like, he didn't even seem good. What are you talking about? He had a terrible fight. But people are well into him. He's got the charisma and people are convinced that he's like the next world beater. And I'm like, I've watched him fight in Cage Warriors. He's not. Weird note about Jordan Williams. He was the guy who was surviving off dog insulin a little while ago. Guys are just, I was going to say a severe diabetic, but you can only really be a diabetic or not. But yeah, he's diabetic, and because of the completely fucked US healthcare system, he can't get or couldn't get insulin at the time. So he was getting like insulin from pet shops, which is just a horrifying thought. But good for him. I think he gave a great account of himself here until he was knocked out. Chris Barnett versus Gian Villante. Oh, yes. I've been looking forward to this one. Gian Villante got on the scales and was like 264 and fat as fuck. He was 240 and fat in his last fight. The man isn't trying. He has a guaranteed paycheck from the UFC. Imagine being this bad at your job and like having absolute disregard for whatever business you're in. A lot of people don't care about whatever, you have to go in the interview and be like, I'm well passionate about barbecues. I want to work at the barbecue selling place. But imagine having like open disdain for everything you do at work, just making a mockery of everyone who wants to get that job or whatever. And still they're like, keep coming back. Come on, Chris Weidman. We love that about you. You've never had an entertaining fight in your life, but Stipe says that you're a really funny guy when you play COD together. So Villante turned up fat as fuck. Chris Barnett is already fat as fuck, but at least that's like part of his character. Do you know what was really funny about this one? Chris Barnett was doing the same thing he was doing against Ben Rothwell, which was Superman punch or Superman jab into run-up low kick and the like slapping the leg with his foot. So DC and Rogan are going on about how like that's not a real low kick. He's not really, it shouldn't really score. It's not doing any damage. And you're like, that was the entire output of Valentina Shevchenko against Amanda Nunes the second time. Go and watch that fight. It's the only technique she uses because she keeps getting backed up against the fence and she doesn't like it. So she jumps over the top of Nunes' guard with a Superman punch and then runs up into a low kick that's just slappy. And she does it about 80 times. But people were pretending that she deserved a world title off that fight. That's all I'm saying, lads. Anyway, that's Valentina told off. Let's talk about this finish. Well, he went for a tornado kick in the first round, which was dope. But in the second round, he step through wheel kick, which is especially cool. And he said like that's vintage Taekwondo because when you fight Taekwondo, guys are immediately going to move back. It's like point fighting of any kind. It's a fencing type sport. It's very much on the line. And you step off the line to escape things, or you go straight back on the line to draw people out and then come back in on the same line. But when you throw a rear leg round kick, the guy will probably shift back and then try and counter you with a rear leg round kick of his own off his new stance. So you step through and you throw the wheel kick, and he did it. It was beautiful. Caught Villante right behind the head, sent him down, finished him. Barnett runs and does a front flip into seated position. I hope it went as viral as it should because it was the perfect way for Chris Barnett to get his first UFC finish. Chris Barnett, Chris Curtis getting UFC finishes. How good is that? Because those guys have been staples of like the regional scene. They're guys where you occasionally see something from them. You go, hey, I'm glad he's still doing it. But I would never have thought they'd be in the UFC getting wins over honestly stiffer competition than I thought they were capable of beating. Yeah, that was good. And then Gian Vellante retired, allegedly. And to be fair, props to Chris Barnett, because he made it all about Vellante in the post-fight. And he gave him a much hyper retirement speech than Gian Vellante deserved. I just hope he stays retired. Because honestly, this is the most I've enjoyed any Gian Vellante fight. That might sound mean-spirited, but the guy had a very boring style. Actually, there was one time where he fought like a taekwondo guy and he beat him up in the UFC. That was quite fun. But definitely not going to miss Gian Vellante edging split decisions over dudes. Or losing split decisions, as he was doing more frequently in recent years. First 3 fights of the night, I can barely remember. They were decisions. We were only interested once Chris Barnett came out and opened the seal on knockouts with his fucking stepping wheel kick. It was just all knockouts all the way up. And just a great night of fights. Great night of fights. I'm going to have to rewatch those prelims because I watched those very early in the night. But if there's anything, if you feel I've missed something important there, tell me and I'll talk about it on the Boycast. But I reckon that'll do us for today because I've definitely gone over an hour. What a great night of fights. What a great night of fights. We've got some interesting ones coming up next week, but those 2 pay-per-views were chef's kiss. I know people hate it when I do that. Anyway, if you want to get in on the Boycast and the stuff I write and you support the podcast and just make it possible for me to do this, sign up to the Patreon. If you want to send an email to the podcast, jackslackpodcast@gmail.com. And if you want to see what I'm writing anytime, fightprimer.com. I am your boy, Jack Slack. Trevor Whitman, Pat Barry, and Chico Camus going, girl, in the corner. Bless.